Most people think an account takeover starts with something dramatic: a brute force attack, a sophisticated exploit, a firewall being bypassed. But most account takeovers begin with something almost forgettable: an email that looked routine, a password reused one too many times, a login session left quietly open. Nothing loud, nothing cinematic. Just a small, ordinary moment that didn't feel important at the time.
Breach Bites TV.
Imagine this scenario. An employee receives an email that appears to come from a familiar cloud service provider. The formatting is correct, the logo is accurate, the timing makes sense. Maybe there was a recent document shared. The message says their session expired and they need to log in again. They click. They enter their credentials. They complete two-factor authentication. The page refreshes normally. They move on with their day. From their perspective, nothing unusual happened. But behind the scenes, the login page was a proxy. The attacker captured the username and password in real time. The two-factor code was relayed instantly to the legitimate service. Valid session token was issued. The attacker now has authenticated access. No alarms triggered. No passwords cracked. Just valid credentials obtained through a familiar workflow. This is phase 1, initial access. And it rarely looks dramatic. It looks like normal behavior intersecting with a manipulated interface. The system doesn't know it's been fooled. It received valid credentials. The human doesn't know they've been fooled. The page looked legitimate. Both sides believe the interaction was authentic. Once inside, the attacker doesn't immediately cause damage. That would increase the chance of detection. Instead, they observe. They map the environment. What permissions does this account have? What services are connected? Are their password managers stored in the browser? Are their shared drives accessible through this identity? Quiet reconnaissance blends in with everyday usage. This is where convenience amplifies impact. Persistent login sessions mean the attacker doesn't need to re-authenticate constantly, since cloud services mean access extends beyond one application. Single sign-on systems mean one compromised account unlocks multiple services. The architecture designed for seamless productivity becomes a pathway for expansion. Next comes persistence. The attacker wants to ensure access continues even if the password is changed. They may add a new recovery email, register an additional authentication device, generate API tokens, create forwarding rules inside email accounts to silently monitor communication. None of these actions are inherently malicious in isolation. They are legitimate features. But in the wrong hands, they become anchors. At this stage, the compromise may still be invisible. The original user can log in normally. Work continues. Emails send. Files sync. Meanwhile, a second presence exists quietly within the same account. Two identities, one credential. Then comes privilege escalation. The attacker looks for opportunities to expand authority. Maybe the compromised user has access to an internal admin portal. Maybe they can request elevated permissions through a workflow that relies on peer approval. Maybe they discover stored credentials in documentation or shared repositories. Attackers don't invent access. They search for it inside existing trust structures. Lateral movement follows naturally. With one account compromised, the attacker may send internal phishing emails that appear to come from a trusted colleague. Because the email originates from a legitimate account, suspicion drops. A second user clicks. The cycle repeats. Each new account increases the blast radius. Throughout this process, behavior remains mostly normal. Logins occur during business hours. Files are accessed that align with job roles. Emails are sent in familiar tones. Security monitoring systems are designed to detect anomalies. But when activity stays close to baseline patterns, alerts may never trigger, or they may be deprioritized. Eventually, the objective is reached. Data is exfiltrated. Sensitive information is copied. Ransomware is deployed, or credentials are sold quietly for later use. From the outside, it looks like a sudden breach. But the reality is slower and more procedural, a chain of small, believable actions. Notice what didn't happen. No encryption was mathematically broken. No futuristic exploit was required. The attacker operated inside the boundaries of normal system functionality. They used authentication systems as designed, used collaboration tools as intended. The breach wasn't a technical collapse. It was a trust chain exploited step by step. This pattern repeats across industries. Financial institutions, healthcare providers, technology companies. The headlines differ, but the mechanics are similar. Valid credentials. Gradual expansion. Normal-looking behavior. Delayed detection. Detection often fails not because tools are absent, but because context is subtle. A login from a slightly unusual location might be explained away as travel. A data download might align with a legitimate project. A new device registration might look like a phone upgrade. Each event has plausible deniability, and plausible deniability slows response. So how do organizations defend against this? Not with a single tool, but with layered friction at key moments. Hardware-bound authentication reduces the risk of credential replay. Shorter session lifetimes limit persistent access. Conditional access policies require re-verification when risk signals change. Network segmentation prevents one compromised account from reaching every system. Monitoring focuses on patterns over time rather than isolated events. At a personal level, the defense begins earlier, begins at the moment of initiation. Was this login prompted by me? Was I expecting this reset? Does this notification align with my current action? Attackers depend on inserting themselves into your workflow. Breaking that insertion point disrupts the entire chain. This is why the idea that I would know if I were hacked is misleading. Account takeovers are designed to be quiet. They rely on your continued normal usage. If everything still works, suspicion rarely arises. Silence becomes camouflage. It also explains why response time is critical. The longer an attacker maintains access, the more embedded they become. Recovery becomes more complex. Trust relationships must be reevaluated. Tokens revoked, devices deregistered, logs analyzed retroactively. What began as a single compromised credential becomes an organizational incident. Zooming out, the anatomy of an account takeover reflects the themes we've been exploring throughout this series. Password rules fail because reuse creates opportunity. Smart people get hacked because familiarity overrides caution. Two-factor authentication isn't enough when sessions can be relayed or stolen. Identity is fragile because it's represented by signals. Convenience accelerates trust extension. And breaches begin with normal behavior because normal behavior is predictable. An account takeover isn't a single event. It's a progression. Initial access, persistence, escalation, expansion. Objective, each step feels manageable on its own. Together, they form a breach. Understanding this progression changes how you interpret cybersecurity headlines. Instead of imagining sudden collapse, you see a timeline. Instead of picturing elite hacking theatrics, you see patient exploitation of trust. And once you understand the sequence, you begin to recognize where small interventions make the biggest difference. Security isn't about eliminating risk entirely. It's about shortening the window between compromise and detection. It's about limiting the blast radius of any single account. It's about designing systems that assume credentials may eventually be exposed and planning accordingly. Because the uncomfortable reality is this: account takeovers will continue to happen. The question isn't whether credentials will be phished somewhere in the world today. They will. The question is how far that compromise can spread before friction intervenes. And that brings us back to the core idea of this channel. Cybersecurity doesn't fail because technology is primitive. It fails because trust is extended efficiently. The same systems that make collaboration seamless also make exploitation scalable. The difference lies in how intentionally friction is placed. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing. This series explores the patterns underneath modern cyber risk, not just the tools, but the behavior and system design that shape outcomes. The more you understand how an account takeover actually unfolds, the easier it becomes to spot the early stages before they escalate. I'll see you in the next one.